Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. You know, there's an autumnal feel in the air. Can't kid yourself that summer's here any longer. At least the weather's good, because we've had horrible, wet, cold weather here at Longmeadow. And this time of year, when the weather's good, you need to take your opportunities, because it's a busy month, October. A lot to do to make sure that the garden is ready to cope with a bad winter if need be, and also so that it performs as well as possible next spring. Now, I shall be planting up these herb cuttings that I took earlier in the summer into the greenhouse to use that space for its maximum potential over the winter months. Carol is showing us how we can reinvigorate perennials and at the same time make new plants for free.
It's such fun dividing plants. What's great about it is not only can you make enough for yourself, you can make plenty so that you can swap and share.
And Rachel is at RHS Rosemoor, looking at plants that can give our gardens another dimension at this time of year.
You could be forgiven for thinking that the visual impact is the most important thing, but I promise you the fragrance is the icing on the cake.
And I'll also be planting up lots of bulbs into the grass here. I grew tomatoes here in the summer and then they got blight. Now the soil hasn't been changed, but the blight won't affect anything other than members of the Solanaceae family, which essentially for gardeners, tomatoes or potatoes. And these are herbs, so they won't be affected by that at all. And these are cuttings that I took in the summer. And you can see, like this sage, they're coming on quite nicely. I potted them up and they've been sitting in pots for the last month or two, and they'll be quite happy to sit over winter in a cold frame. But if I put them in the greenhouse, it'll have the same effect as a cold frame, but also they'll grow a little and it will just give a little bit of a supply over winter. And then I can move them to the herb garden next May when I'm ready to plant out the tomatoes. And the fact that the soil hasn't been changed, is slightly exhausted, is good for Mediterranean herbs. They don't like lush, rich conditions. What they want is a little bit of hardship as long as the drainage is good. And I'll plant them out quite close. So this is a narrow leaf sage. And if I just take that out. So if I just pop this out on the edge, put that there like that. I've got some thyme there that I dug up from the ornamental vegetable garden that were having a tough time of it because they were getting too shaded. And thyme hates shade. So I'm going to plant those out too, and they will do much better. Greenhouses are good places to grow Mediterranean herbs. And there it goes. I've got parsley here too. This is giant parsley, loose-leafed. This, of course, has been grown from seed, not taken from a cutting, and this will grow quite well over winter and form quite a decent-sized plant. And I suppose really the point about this is that you're using the protection that you've got, and use the greenhouse, fill it up. Don't just see it as somewhere that is for summer plants. What the Mediterranean herbs really hate here at Longmeadow is a cold, wet winter. It's a real struggle for them to survive. And of course, if you don't have a greenhouse, you can do it on a windowsill, you can do it in a pot. Any protected environment that you can stop getting too wet, that's the worst thing, and then a little bit of heat, even if it's just a pane of glass. And with a little bit of winter sun, they will grow. And actually, at the same time, release that lovely, oily fragrance that makes Mediterranean herbs so special. Talking of fragrance, of course, in winter, there isn't much to be found, but it's surprising how many plants have a delicious scent at this time of year. And Rachel has been to RHS Rosemoor in search of them.
At Rosemoor, I'm following my nose to find the most perfumed plants for this time of year, for every size of garden. In the hot garden here at Rosemoor, these late season perennials are very much the star of the show, and right in the heart of the thing, we've got this wonderful bergamot, the Monarda prairie knack. It's absolutely smothered in bees at the moment, and given that we've had such an awful year for bees, it's been very wet. Well, this in itself is a reason to plant it. The Monarda has very aromatic fragrance to the foliage, but when you see them in this setting, I mean, just surrounded by the heleniums, the rudbeckias, all those wonderful purples and oranges and golds, well, you could be forgiven for thinking that the visual impact is the most important thing. But I promise you, the fragrance is the icing on the cake. I always think of phlox as absolute cottage garden stalwarts, but of course they're lovely in any border setting. This is a gorgeous white form, Paniculata Mount Fuji, but they also come in sort of sugared almond shades of mauve and pale blues. They're very fragrant, and that fragrance is quite powdery. It's quite fresh and clean as well. And it's obviously very attractive to all sorts of beneficial insects, including butterflies, bees, and above all moths who have a long proboscis, and that gets down into the tubular part of the flower. But in this setting, surrounded by dazzling white flowers and silvery foliage, well, they positively sparkle. One of the most surprising fragrances you'll find wafting around in autumn comes from the Katsura tree. It's native to China and Japan, where in the wild it can grow up to 200 feet tall with a massive girth of 80 foot, so you'll need a big garden to accommodate it. But its sweet scent, which comes from its delicate leaves, can fill an entire garden. Those leaves, which are sort of heart-shaped, as they turn to these lovely colours of ochre and gold, well, the sugars within them break down, and then you get this fragrance, and it's like toffee apples just wafting across the garden almost to get you. It's fantastic and redolent of everything about autumn. Bonfire nights, those lovely crisp mornings. This really is a favourite fragrance at this time of year. There's room in most gardens for shrubby perennials, and many have outstanding late summer scent too. The pineapple sage, Salvia elegans, is renowned for its flowers, but its foliage has the most intense and delicious fragrance. I think it's beautiful as a foliage plant, and these leaves, which are so good to look at, they're also intensely, sweetly scented of pineapples. Plants that produce aromatic foliage, they usually do so as a deterrent to insects or to grazing animals, as a way of saying, keep off and don't eat me. But I have to say, in a garden situation, spectacular. The Victorians knew a thing or two about plants, and they were big fans of heliotropes, which they use very often in their bedding schemes. This one is called Heliotropium arborescens Chatsworth, and it's a particularly good form with really intense dark purple flowers and a good, lovely colour to the foliage and stems as well. It's very sweet, perhaps even slightly cloying, and reminds me of cherry pie. But I think here at the front of the border, it's absolutely stunning. If you want the added dimension of late summer scent in the garden, these are plants both great and small to fill your senses throughout autumn.
I guess that most gardeners think of you as this monumental hedging material that will create a solid green backdrop to a border or along the boundary of a garden. But it can make a really good low hedge, and I'm thinking about using it to replace box if I lose all my box to box blight. And now is the perfect time of year to both plant yew and also to take cuttings. Now, when you're looking for cut material for yews, you want leaders. And you can see here is a good example. Here we have a nice, strong leader. That's good 12 inches of growth this year, and that will make a healthy plant. There's another one there. But all the way up the stem, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 side shoots. Now, those side shoots will provide cut material, but it will never make a good upright plant. These are semi-ripe cuttings, which means that it's this year's growth, but it's starting to harden off. It hasn't yet got brown and woody, but it's not floppy. When you bend it, it returns to its shape. If you haven't got an unclipped yew hedge or access to one, sometimes it's worth just buying one healthy plant just for cutting material. Do as we always do with cuttings, is pop it into a polythene bag so it doesn't lose too much moisture, although evergreens do lose their moisture much more slowly than deciduous plants. Now, if you're taking any cuttings at all, it's worth preparing a compost with extra perlite or grit in it. And this will make a freer root run, so these delicate little roots have less obstruction, and also the roots can rot and the base of the plant can rot before it roots if it sits in cold, wet water. And then there are two ways of taking cuttings from you. The first is conventional. You've got a good shoot there. Strip off the bottom half of the leaves, cut that off, slightly damage it because that will stimulate growth, and then slide it in against the edge of the pot. If that roots, it'll provide a nice, vigorous, upright plant. However, what you can do with you is I can divide it up into stem cuttings. So if I cut there and there, I've got 3 lengths. I can strip the bottom off and I can put these in, and these will each root and make a cutting that's rather bushier. This is the perfect time of year to take any evergreen cutting. Although you don't always propagate plants to make new ones, sometimes you have to do it for the health of the plant. And Carol is answering a question this week on how best to divide fibrous rooted plants.
We get lots of emails from all over Europe, and of course we share a lot of the same gardening problems. We've had one from Judith Siegmann in Germany, who's wondering what on earth she can do to get her agapanthus to flower. She says, rather sadly, "I remember them flowering each and every year around my birthday. Now there's just an odd flower. I'm at my wit's end to know what to do. I really miss those masses of blue flowers that I remember so fondly." Well, you've also sent us some photos, Judy, and your agapanthus actually look really, really healthy. Masses of green leaves, but as you say, not a flower in sight. Perhaps the answer is to try dividing some of these plants to get them to produce those lovely blue flowers you remember so well. Well, as you can see, I'm lucky enough to have this wonderful big pot of agapanthus. Well, last year I divided one of my plants that had stopped flowering and was pot-bound. And I made 4 big chunks, and 3 of them have actually flowered this time. So it's definitely worth a try. Now, the other little point you mentioned is that you keep your plants in a cellar over winter. Now, because the Pricox group are evergreen, I think really being deprived of light for so long is also going to work against their flowering. So if you possibly can, still giving them the frost protection they need, give them more light too. This time of the year is the ideal time to divide plants with big fleshy roots, like agapanthus. Hemerochilus are closely related, and they too can be divided now. There are 2 times of year when division is a good idea. One's the autumn and one's the spring. I wouldn't dream of dividing these beautiful rudbeckias and these asters, the Michaelmas daisies, because they're just coming into their own. It'd be cruel. I divide them in the spring, but there are several plants here, and there are 3 clumps of one daylily, which really do need my attention. It's not just a question of making more plants and doing you a favour. It's almost like the plants themselves tell you when they want to be divided. When their performance, their flowering and perhaps their foliage is just not what it once was, it's time to step in, dig it up and make it into lots of new plants and just discard those old woody centres. So you want to get the first fork right into the middle of the clump. You need a good aim, and then with the second fork really back to back. The 2 should be touching, and you can hear that sort of rending noise, and it seems so terribly cruel, but you're just being cruel to be kind. All this tatty foliage, you can pull it off, but I think then it's a good idea to just chop it. And those roots are a bit long too. You never ever want to fold roots when you're replanting them, so I'll give them a quick haircut. So I'm going to dig a hole nice and deep. These daylilies will overwinter in my veggie bed before I plant them out in the spring. In the shady part of the garden, I want to make some more of one of my favourite woodland plants. This is an epimedium. This one's called Epimedium versicolor. I always want more of it, and now is the time to divide it. Now you can see here what I'm after is each piece has got to have one or two at least of these fat little pink buds, because those are what's going to make next year's flowers and new leaves. By rinsing the roots you can see the buds more clearly before putting the plants in pots. In the spring, if they've got a really well-developed root system, you can plant them out. If not, just hang on for a bit and plant them later. Well, this time of year, garden centres are full of plants and a lot of them are going cheap. It's a great time to be planting new stuff out, but it's an even better time to see if you can't get a few good divisions from each plant that you buy. Some things are still in full flower, like this gorgeous crimson lobelia. But in this case, it's already making rosettes at the bottom. If I use these flower stems to just push the whole thing apart. Oh, look at that. Two nice big chunks first of all, and then I can pull these other pieces off too. It's such fun dividing plants. What's great about it is not only can you make enough for yourself, you can make plenty so that you can swap and share. And of course, in the process, you're reinvigorating all those plants.
We've all seen daffodils growing in grass where you get these incredible blades of yellow and orange, almost looking like a huge flower border for a few weeks in March and April. And that's lovely. However, you can grow daffodils so that they grow in the grass like wildflowers. And there is one native, or at least naturalized daffodil called Narcissus pseudo-narcissus, that actually grows in this part of the world on the edge of woods, and you see these delicate flowers leaking out into the fields. And they like damp, fairly woodlandy conditions, and an orchard is absolutely ideal. But they are slow to develop. So this is something that you do for the long term. They're not going to give you a big hit. But if I plant them now, which is exactly the right time, there's a chance that about half of them will flower next year, and then more and more will flower, and then they'll spread by seed. There is a technique to making them look natural. And I've tried every way, and I can guarantee that the only way to do it is just take a handful of bulbs and then cast them to the winds. And plant them exactly where they land. And if they land in clumps and groups, it doesn't matter, because that's how they grow in the wild. Now, having done that, you then need the right tool for the job. With these tiny bulbs, if the ground is moist enough, a trowel will do the job. But remember, you want to plant twice their own depth. So that's quite deep. With a bigger bulb, it's worth investing in a stand-up bulb planter. Helps your back, and you just push down on it like that, take out a hole, and what it does is create a core. And it really, really saves a lot of time and effort. So I highly recommend these. And with daffodils, you do want to get on with this because they start growing now. And the more time they have to grow in the ground, the more likely they are to produce a flower. So you just pop that in and pop that over the top. It's a good idea if you're planting a lot of bulbs in grass to put a hose onto the area for an hour or two. You'll find the whole process is a lot easier. And also, after you've planted, if it's dry, water them well. They need moisture in autumn in order to produce the best flowers in spring. This is Narcissus poeticus. It comes from subalpine meadows down as far south as Greece and on the Mediterranean, but essentially this is damp, hilly ground, and it's hardy. So this will grow anywhere in Britain, and as long as it's reasonably damp and not too dry, it'll thrive. And what it gives you is that halfway house between the ephemeral quality of Pseudonarcissus and the slightly overpowering muscularity of some of the daffodil hybrids. And also, if you look at it, it's a great big bulb. You can pretty much guarantee that this will flower next year, so you're getting an immediate return and display. And I'm going to put some around these individual trees in what will be a loose group, and hopefully they will then mingle and merge with the Pseudonarcissus as they in time spread. Now obviously I want these bulbs to look as natural as possible, but however hard you try, it never quite looks the same in a garden as it does in the wild. And perhaps the most incredible display of natural bulbs in the whole of Britain are the Fritillaries at Cricklade Water Meadows.
Northmeadow is just such a stunning place. One of those places you just have to see before you die, I think. Northmeadow holds 80% of the UK's population of Fritillary, Fritillaria meleagris, which are known locally as snake's head fritillaries. Snake's head refers to the way they snake their way out of the grasses with this beautiful checkered pattern on them, almost with a viper-like face. Here in front of me we've got a lovely display of fritillaries in their different stages. So if we look at this one here, is not going to flower this year. It probably didn't build up a big enough corm last year, but the plants can actually survive. The corm's 25 to 30 years. Just behind it, one that's just snaked up out of the ground, and there we can see that it's going to be a purple flower by the brown on the stalk. This one, in flower beautifully, we can see the anthers inside and where all the bumblebees are going to go in and collect their pollen and do their work. Just a little bit further over, a lovely example of a white fritillary, but you can see green stem, that shows that it's going to be that white even when it's in bud. But look at these, where they have that viper-like face and that beautiful snake's head patterning. Northmeadow is 110 acres, but on all sides bounded by a river, so the River Churn and the River Thames. We don't really know how long fritillaries have been in Northmeadow. We certainly know that they were noted as being in the wild from 1736. They were picked by their armfuls at one time, but no picking now. This is a standing hay crop. It's grown until the end of June. So there's no interference with fritillaries. They're allowed to set their seed. The seed falls to the ground well before the hay is taken. Then the cattle come in and graze the land nice and short. The fritillaries at that point are underground, growing their next year's corm. Then we may get some flooding, which brings on the fertility for all of the flowers here, including the fritillaries. In spring again, up they come, and there's no cattle on here. So everything here is going to be for success of fritillaries in flower. People come, and especially on my guided walks, will ask me how they can grow fritillaries in their gardens. The conditions that they grow best in are moist conditions, but not on the edge of a pond. They're not marginal plants. Some people think because it floods here they need to be in water. That's not the case. So yes, they like their moisture, but don't put them in too damp an area. If you've got a deciduous tree, an apple tree or something in your lawn, plant them around that. They'll get the early light levels, so they'll come up through the grasses, let them self-seed, and hopefully you will have lots more fritillaries in time to come. Just remember where they are so you don't give that bit of lawn an early cut. I think a lot of gardens in Cricklade have their own little patch of fritillaries. They are very much woven into the fabric of the community here. We just love the time when the fritillaries, when the meadow gets that purple haze on it and you know the fritillaries are out.
I think those meadows are so beautiful, and I'd really like to go and see them next spring. Now, it'd be nice to have a 100-acre water meadow filled with fritillaries, but most of us don't have that opportunity. If you've got a patch of damp, grassy ground, then you can plant the bulbs straight in. But they also grow very well and look great in a spring border. But when you look at the border at this time of year, there's no space to plant them. And even if there is a patch, you're not certain that it will look right come next March and April. So what I like to do is to plant the bulbs in pots, let them grow on, and then plant out the young plants as the foliage appears next spring. And you just need a normal compost. You don't need any extra drainage. Put a little bit in the bottom of the pot, and then put 1 or 2 of the bulbs about 4 times its own depth. They need to be planted quite deep. And you don't need to keep the pot in any way protected. It's adapted to cold, wet weather, and then you can deal with them in spring. Now, even if you don't want to plant fritillaries, here are some things you can get on with this weekend. If you've got a decent apple crop this year, and not everybody has, then it's worth taking trouble to store them. And in general, any apple that ripens from mid-October onwards will store better than early ripeners. And the secret is to collect them very carefully, handle them gently, and then store them on racks so they're ventilated and in the cool and dark. Make sure that no one fruit is touching another, and check them regularly to remove any that are damaged. It'll soon be time to start collecting leaves, and I regard leaf mould as important as compost. So to make room for this year's leaves, it's a good idea to bag up last year's leaf mould. It can then be stored anywhere you like, where it will quietly go on improving, or else be sieved ready for use as potting compost straight away. Pumpkins are not going to get any bigger from that one. However, there is a chance for them to ripen if we get some sunshine. So remove all foliage around the fruits so that they're exposed to whatever sun we get. And the more they ripen, the thicker their skins will be. And the thicker their skins, the better they keep. Well, this tray of fritillaries can just go here, where they won't get bashed, but they need no attention at all. And then when they're growing, I'll plant them out next spring. That's it for this week. I'll be back here at Longmeadow, same time next Friday, so join me then. Bye-bye.